Hello, everyone. So for those that have met you, hello again. For those that haven't, hello. Today's masterclass is what does it take to launch a successful fashion business? So first things first, I'll say a little bit about me before we actually get into what we're doing today. So my business is called my name, Carly Johnson, and it did rebrand recently from being called Unzipped, for those that may know that. I'm based in Melbourne. I'm English originally, so a lot of my background started off in London. So I have worked in New York, in London, in Melbourne, so I'm a bit of a global gal. And I have worked for quite a few brands, some that you'll know, like New Look, Miss Selfridge, and Forever New and Cotton On over here in Australia. And so my business, it helps fashion startups, it helps fashion brands. So there's kind of a two-sided approach, help fashion startups to launch. So that's actually through my online course and coaching program. And then I also do consulting. So I help brands with like sales strategies, pretty much anything that they're struggling with, I'll give them a customizable approach. And also I do a bit of lecturing work. So yeah, I've kind of got multiple different projects going at any time, but my world is fashion and my world is fashion e-commerce. I really know it inside out and love it to pieces. So yeah, that's a snapshot about me. Gosh, I think my clicker's not working. So let's get going. So my first question, because this is about what it takes to successfully launch a fashion business. So it's always an interesting question to ask yourself, like, what does success actually mean? So one of the best ways to actually learn how to be successful is to actually learn from mistakes. So whatever mistakes we make, we learn from them, we evolve, we're better, we avoid them next time. So there's one thing I wanted to start with, which is actually highlighting to you what are the 8 most common mistakes that fashion brands actually make. Because again, this will teach you how to be successful. So with this is the 8 on the screen, and this is actually covered quite in detail in a blog post I've got, but some of them we're actually going to touch on today, which is actually all around money. So you really need to focus on breaking even to actually be successful, because a lot of brands will actually go out of business because they simply didn't plan to have enough cash flow to actually break even when they launch. And other things we're going to talk about today is not launching on time, because again, this is a critical thing about being successful. If you don't launch on time, then you've got less selling period to sell your product. It may not seasonally be correct. You may have to put it straight into markdown, therefore you're not selling at full price. There's so many downfalls of not launching on time. So some of these in these top 8 we're going to go through today. But one thing I guess I'm just encouraging you in this very beginning is just learn from your mistakes. Don't be afraid to make them. So what's the purpose of today? So at this really early stage, so I'm talking pre-design. So the lessons I'm talking about, I really encourage you to actually pause and try to implement these before you invest too much time in your brand. And that's just something, again, that really is one of these success criteria, that the sooner that you actually do the upfront work, the bigger success rate you'll have at actually your product being in demand and selling itself. So that's the purpose of today's masterclass, is to set you up for success when you do launch. The outcome, so how I've done the masterclass today, each topic, so there's 4 topics and there's 4 questions. So by the end of this masterclass, I want you to be confident in answering these questions, and therefore this will set you up to successfully launch your business. So what are the questions? I didn't even go through those, but will my product sell? How much money do I need to break before you break even? When should I launch? And how am I going to sell my collection? Cool. So the first question, topic 1, will my product sell? So pretty much what this is, you'll hear this quite a lot. This is about finding a product niche. This is about validating your idea. So this is like a buzzword that you'll hear quite heavily, and it's so important to the success that you actually start here. So this is a method that you can use for your overall brand, for your overall collection, to actually find your that your idea is correct. But also, if you say you've launched, let's just say a ladies wear brand, and you want to launch a new product category, you can also use the same approach to validate that category will work within the bigger scale of your brand. So this is, a really useful process. So what are the 6 methods that you must use? Oh, my numbers have gone weird. So the first one is actually identifying a demand. And then you need to look at what your competitors are doing to make sure you're different. You then need to work out who your audience is. And then once you know where your audience shops, you can decide what channel you should use to sell your product. Then you need to dig a little bit deeper about how to price competitively. And then lastly, only once you've gone through these 6 stages are you ready to validate. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these today because this is just topic 1 out of 4. But this is just what I encourage you to do when you're trying to find a new idea, a new niche. So how to make data-driven decisions. So firstly, let's say when you're looking for the best product idea, you've always got a starting point. So you need to take this starting point. This is your idea that I'm going to launch a swimwear brand. Fantastic, great. But why? What does the data tell you about why you should launch a swimwear brand? These are the answers that you really need to be able to answer to make sure that there is enough demand for it. So how I encourage brands to do this is pretty much you can use Google. You can use Google search terms, but that costs you money. So that's something that, of course you can go and do that. But if you want to validate your idea, your starting point, there are 2 tools that I recommend. One's called Ubersuggest and the other is Keyword Generator. And what these will do is to share data with you about how many times is that phrase, that product being searched for in Google or in Amazon, that will tell you that this product's actually in demand in your market. So really, really important that you don't just assume it's in demand, that you actually get data to back you up. So pretty much the one thing that's extremely important is that you actually understand what you are looking for before you start to use those 2 tools. So the first is that you're looking for high search volume, but with low competition. So obviously, if it's got high search volume and high competition, therefore you're entering a crowded market. How are you going to be at the top when you're a brand spanking new brand? That would require a lot of marketing spend. Therefore, you're trying to look for high search volume, low competition. So what we're looking for in here is the 2 forms of competition to look at. One is paid, so paid marketing, and SEO. So that's just kind of explaining what that means there. So let's talk a little bit more about the 2 tools that I'm encouraging you to use. So Ubersuggest is free, as mentioned. It comes from a guy called Neil Patel, who is absolutely fantastic in the world of e-commerce, but specifically marketing advertising. So what you do here is you enter your word as mentioned, and what you're trying to look at is the volume for that keyword, but also what's amazing about this tool is if you type in, say again, swimwear, it will then break down women's swimwear, kids, or it might start to say one-piece swimwear or plus-size swimwear. So it actually gives you suggested related keywords that could have higher demand than your initial idea, therefore suggesting to you that there's greater demand for something else, which suggests to you that, again, your product will sell. It will be more successful if you actually offer that type of product. So here's just an example here. So say if you plugged in women's swimwear, that has 22,000 searches, but bikini has more. So that again is suggesting if you do focus on bikinis, then you're niching even further in your product and you're answering to the demand in the market. So let me just explain this and then I'll show you an example of exactly what I'm talking about. So here is what you're simply looking at. There's these 4 metrics, which is volume. As mentioned, you want this to be high and you don't want it to be too difficult. So this here is out of 100. So that's a benchmark that you want it to be pretty much this or less. And here I'm looking at the Australian dollar. So apologies, is the platform. I look at. You want this to really be less than, I'd say £1 is your closest when you're looking at marketing. So that's just an example of looking for high volume and low competition, because this is SEO and marketing costs. So let's just go for an example. Here we go. So this is, I'll just show you up there. So it's Neil Patel, Uber Suggests. And yeah, what you do, so you guys are in the UK. Let me just do English, UK. Should have probably pre-done this. Noted. There we go. Perfect. So I'm just going to stick with the same one, swimwear, and search. So this, again, you can do in different territories. So dependent on wherever you live in the world, you would search by the market that you're planning to launch in. So here we can see swimwear. So this is looking at England. It's got a 27,000 searches per month in Google for swimwear. So that's got a high demand. And looking at the difficulty here, so SEO is fairly high, but the actual cost, so for you to actually market to own that search, so you'd sit higher in Google at the top of the page, it's actually not too expensive. So what's interesting here, if you scroll down, it starts to give you ideas. So this is where it's starting to evolve and stretch that what's actually more of a niche product. Is it, again, here, swimwear for plus size? Okay, interesting. There's 8,000 searches here. And here you can see the cost per click is similar. So it's got a medium search with a low competition. So that's not that bad. So if you were interested in, say, plus size swimwear, you could start to dig into this a little bit deeper. And if my spinny circle stops, then you can start to see, oh, okay, right, who's owning the market of plus size swimwear based on Google? So now you can start to understand who your competitors are and learn from them. So tools like this, again, are just a way of not just saying, okay, I've got this great idea and just going off and doing it. This is actually validating that is there demand. Is there a customer in the UK for this product? Yes, because there's a lot of searches every single month. And I can see who my competition are, so I can start to go and learn about them. So you're really starting to validate and gain more market research before, again, you spend money in a product that may have like no demand in your market. So hopefully that explains Uber Suggests a little bit better. Let's quickly press present again. And so there's another one I wanted to talk you through. So it's really good to have a comparison. So what Keyword Generator does is Uber Suggests focuses on Google. But for example, if you wanted to launch in the US, Amazon is highly used by shoppers to start their product search. So people would go onto Amazon as opposed to Google to start their search for products in that market. So if you use Keyword Generator, this actually helps you to find trends, on Amazon and YouTube. So let me just quickly show you what that one looks like. And it's a very similar principle. So that was the name of the tool. I actually don't think I said that. So here you can see very, very similar principle. You could go on, say, Amazon, and you can type in the same. Let's just maybe do swimwear plus size. Let's see if this comes up. And what's happening this time, so we can see it's less because we're specifically looking on Amazon, and this is very similar to last time. It's showing what's the volume. So on Amazon, I've just kept it as the US. Per month, people are actually typing in that word swimwear plus size women. So you can actually start to see like, what are people searching for within that specific category? So it could get a little bit more detailed here. So people want cover-ups for plus size swimwear. So this is, again, validating your original idea as well as suggesting ideas to you for extra product assortment, extra offer to hit the demand in that market. Great. So that's those two tools explained. So moving on, so yeah, the outcome is to pretty much refine your starting point and to get more detailed about the demand of your product in your market. So a quick case study. So this is Rack, who's based in Australia. So why they sell. So you can go check out their website by all means. I haven't got it open, but why they ended up finding a gap and working out that their product will sell is simply because they tapped into a plus size market that's growing here, but even more niche. They only offer larger swimwear for women with bigger busts. So it's actually focusing not just on the overall body size, but specifically the boobs, therefore it's D+. So they really focused about the quality because they found loads of feedback to do with people wanted supportive cups on their swimwear. So they really just didn't stay at, I just want to do swimwear. They actually found out that there was a niche for plus size swimwear, a niche for bigger bust swimwear, and a niche for supportive swimwear. So that's then how they found their specific niche in the market and have built a very successful brand. Cool. So sticking with the criteria, the 6 I pointed out that you need to do to validate if your idea will sell, let's move on to who is your target audience. So why this is so important in just working out if your product will sell. If you just go and launch any product, like who are you expecting to buy it if you don't actually know who your audience is? And it's such a simple statement for me to say, but it's really, really fundamental to your success that you actually know who that person is, because your product should be designed to their pain point, to their need. It shouldn't just be a dream of yours to just make it. You really need to know who you're making it for, and that will set you up again to succeed because your product will sell. It will speak to that audience directly. So it's not just about selling the product, it's also about, it'll help you to market your product. It'll help you in so many different ways, how to price it, how to market it, by knowing who your audience is. So there are 3 steps to pretty much getting it right. So you need to define who your ideal buyer is. Then you need to understand their traits and trends. And then you need to understand their mood. So once you've worked through this progressive step by step again, the final outcome is that you can actually create, it's like an avatar. So you can have this person that you could say called Tina, and Tina is your ideal customer in the UK. So whenever you're designing something, you can say, would that suit Tina? And you can really make them feel like a real life character. So if you do this, I always encourage you to print it out and have it in front of you, so you're always referring to Tina as my example. So what are the steps? So the starting point in defining who they are is, again, starting at the very beginning. So the first things to consider are age, gender, and location. So that's always a starting point. So within that, it's a case of knowing what territory, what market are you launching in? The gender, like, are you going to do male or female? Like who? Like, be specific. And what age? Because age, it's really hard if you go really wide and say 18 to 60. It's very hard to find a product that's that generic. And again, with that, I encourage you to niche and be more specific, which will help you to target that specific customer who's going to buy your product. So when you're setting your business up, you're setting a business up to be a business selling to a consumer, B2C. So in most cases, in most of your cases, you're looking to sell high volume, and you're probably looking to sell at a lower price point. Therefore, you're trying to look for the trends to help you to make this decision in the market to really, again, home in and find the right audience. So what else shall we go with? Which age? Start by looking at age groups. So that's the starting point. So within age groups, what am I talking about? This actually just comes down to breaking it down into the generic generation categories. So here we've got baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Zs. So within this, like, it might sound again simple, but it's a great way to say, where does my audience exist? because there's fantastic companies like McKinsey, and McKinsey, as well as BOF, would even refer to them, Business of Fashion, that they will very much talk about changing trends and traits within the generation group. So how has the Gen Z audience changed during COVID? What are their shopping trends and traits? How have they changed? Like, what's important to them? So if you know and kind of choose a generation, there's publications, etc., that will help you to evolve and be aware of the changes in your audience. Therefore, you can cater what you're doing in your business to suit these trends and changes. So this is important that you, in your audience, understand the age bracket that you're selling to. And there's so many useful tools out there that will help you to really target them better. So this is just a quick screenshot, but by all means, McKinsey here is a link that I encourage you to go and read. It's really detailed, it's really great, and it will help you to know, is mobile important? Do they use Facebook? Like, there's loads of statistics that will help you to talk to your audience a lot easier. So moving on, once you know their overall age trends and traits, the next thing is to look at audience mood. So this is when you're really starting to get to know your audience. So what you're trying to find out is their hopes and dreams, their pains and fears, as well as what annoys them. Like, what product can you give them and service that will just be amazing? You can answer to their pain points. So ways you can start to do this is, now you know like what market, you know their age, you know their gender, you can actually start to try and find your customers. So the ways you can do this is hanging out on Facebook groups, checking out product reviews of your competitors that target a similar audience, Reddit again, so any of the forums, and again, looking at your competitors' social media posts. So really starting to connect and start to follow accounts that follow your competitors, start to learn about your audience and really understand, especially if you read reviews. Again, this is to my earlier point about success. If they're giving you, somebody feedback to say this was like disappointing, this was bad, you're going to learn from mistakes, and therefore you can offer a service, a solution that would make that audience really happy and hopefully come over and be an ambassador of your brand. So this is Jack Ma. Opportunities lie in the place where complaints are. So that's just encouraging you to actually, again, learn from mistakes, read complaints, and offer the solution. So now, as mentioned, what I said is work through those 3 points about defining who your audience is and create these avatars. So this is just an example of kind of prompts that you could answer. But once you've got this, it helps you to really focus on designing product, doing marketing campaigns that really target this customer, which again will help you to sell your product. So a case study here, for those that were present in my last masterclass, I did use Amos as an example. So these guys launched, it was really slow. They just didn't really know why it wasn't working. So I'll show you some imagery in a second, but pretty much they were trying to sell jeans and t-shirts to entrepreneurs that drink whiskey. So it was a bit of a merge of a concept. So this is what they looked like. So it was quite conflicting in crystal glasses versus casual looks. So it wasn't really it wasn't very targeted to their audience, who they thought it was to who it actually is. So here is when they actually realized that the product and the vibe, the outlook that they wanted, it wasn't a case of the stereotypical entrepreneur. It's a case of actually just the confidence and how they then portrayed that in the strong kind of stances of the models and actually matching back the right model look with the products that they were trying to sell. So here you can see that that's really how it's so important to know who your audience is, because it really frames everything that you do beyond sales and marketing. Cool. So next thing in one of the top 6 pointers. So what markets and sales channels are right for you? So when deciding which market to launch in, these are just some questions I really encourage you to answer. And again, it's really a case of, a lot of us would say, I live in the UK, therefore I'm going to launch in the UK, which is not a bad thing because that market, you'll save on shipping costs, etc. It's a smart move. But what you need to do is, if you decide that market, you really need to question about the perception of your brand versus the perception of that market. Like, are you trying to do something that's quite different, quite quirky? And does that sit back with the British customer? So don't just take it as a blanket rule. I live in the UK, I will launch in the UK, that's that. Actually go beyond that and start to answer these questions, ask yourself them, and actually verify that your brand's vision and what it stands for sits back within that market. The customer will understand and say, and actually what's the right word, connect with you. If you don't think that's the case, then you should start to consider, say, Eastern Europe or US. Like, make sure that your product and your brand, everything you stand for, is going to be understood. So here are, again, just some questions I'd ask you to answer when you're starting to decide here. Because again, just to keep bringing it back to the question, if you don't do this validating step, you could just be launching a product that's either like super expensive, just not answering the pain points of that audience, or just simply not understood. So you'd spend a lot of money in marketing it if you don't answer these questions. Cool. So how you can do this, just to give you some tips. Really, it's about understanding, when you're trying to look to expand as well, about the potential of that market. So that can be, who's digitally mature, who's expanding as a market, as a territory, what's declining. So here we can see, like, what are the biggest e-commerce markets? Therefore, if you're going to launch an e-commerce brand, you should be considering some of the more mature, larger markets if you're all about driving revenue. So that's a pointer when you're trying to decide your market. You can actually look at the size, how much money you could make. You could look at penetration. So this is a case of how many.
Hey, how are you?
Oops.
All right, thank you.
I don't know if anyone got the powers to mute.
Yeah, I'm doing it now.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So this is another way of looking at it. It's penetration. So pretty much online shopping by country, which illustrates how many people are actually shopping online. So how strong is that as a form of commerce? Or you could look at the compound annual growth rate. So again, this is looking for e-commerce sales by country. So again, just showing, this is just different ways that you can not just say, I'm going to launch in the UK because I'm based in the UK. You can actually start to understand which markets are thriving, which are the strongest versus others. So here you can say these guys are above like the global average rate of the compound annual growth rate. So that might be a little bit too detailed, but if you're interested in finding out more, statistica.com is a fantastic tool to start to understand which markets are booming, which are declining, and starting to understand more about the size of the prize, that the worth of the e-commerce markets in specific countries. Cool. So that was a broader topic around what market to choose. This is now a case of what channel to choose. So once you know your market, choose your channel. So when you're looking to launch, I do encourage you to like focus on one or two, but also I do encourage to offer an omnichannel approach. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't just spread yourself too thin, and therefore it's a huge workload which could be overwhelming and things could go wrong. So be strategical, be tactical, but the omnichannel is also a fantastic strategy where you can have presence on a couple of sites, which just helps with marketing, helps with brand awareness, helps with customer service, because you could have click and collect set up, which will help those that prefer for that kind of physical touch point. So do consider omnichannel. channel, but on here there are the most obvious options for you, which no doubt most of you will be doing direct to consumer, building up your brand presence and focusing on that for like the first year of launch. And then potentially in year 2, 3, you'd look to do wholesale. So that's the most common way of doing it. You know, set up, test that everything's working by yourself, and then start to spread your wings and go into an omni-channel approach. So pretty much it's your choice. And the main thing here is that you just need to make sure you're present on the channels where your customer is. So this links back to really knowing who your target audience is first. Cool. So a reminder, a final one here is when to successfully choose the right market and channel, you need to weigh up so the market opportunity versus your ability. So don't just be like, okay, I'm going to launch in India. Can you get there? How easy is it for you? And then weighing up where your target audience shops versus I've just dreamt of launching in Selfridges. Like, again, does your audience shop in Selfridges? And then what channel matches back to your brand values and ambitions. So just pretty much, again, keep it real, don't go too crazy, but these are just 3 reminders to help you to get to the answer. Great. So a case study here. So Little Noah, this is just a great example. So they, for example, launched direct to consumer only in Australia last November. And the reason they did that was to actually test and to get to know their audience more. So they were working out where were they shipping in the world and started to switch on different countries based on the demand and based on what their audience was telling them. So then from this, they're now moving into an omnichannel approach. And they know that there's demand in the UK and Ireland. Therefore, they're looking for wholesale opportunities there. So again, it might be a smaller reach to start off with and get to know that audience, sell to the audience in your market, the chosen launch market, and then expand after that. Cool. So outcome, hopefully now you'll have a more solid answer to will your idea actually sell your product, and you should know exactly what market, what channel to launch your product in based on data, based on demand. Cool. So topic 2, moving on. How much money do you need to invest till you break even? So this is all about cash flow management. So if a reminder to go back to the first few slides when I'm talking about the 8 failures, a huge way that brands fail is that they simply don't have enough money behind them until they break even. So it's so important that you actually understand how much money you're going to outlay before you get that first bit of revenue coming in. So part of that is also around a successful pricing strategy, because you need to make sure there's enough fat in your retail prices to make a good enough margin. And then you need to understand how to forecast sales. So let's get into this one. Oh, sorry, that's very bright. So first, how to create a successful pricing strategy. So this is generally a topic that a lot of people think that they've done, and there are like a few different ways to do it, but I'm just going to walk you through the way that I've done it for all of the big brands that I've worked for. So the first thing is it's all about profit. Like, you're trying to be competitive, but also you're trying to be profitable. So it's such an important balance that you don't just focus on one, which again, I see a lot with startup brands, where it's like, oh gosh, I'm only making 20% gross margin. That's not that bad. Like, be realistic in what you're trying to achieve in the first year. Is it about getting your brand out there, being successful, making money as well? Yeah, as being competitive. So what you're trying to do, looking at how you want to be perceived by your price point. So perception is always something you should always be questioning. What does that say about my brand? The next is how to actually conduct a price comparison of your competitors. Then step 3 is how to actually look at third-party channels to understand that pricing analysis. So how much does your competitor price on ASOS versus on their own website, so you can understand up pricing. And then method 4 is how to analyze and consider exchange rates. So that's something, again, that you should always consider. You shouldn't just use that set exchange rate that Google says this today. You should actually decide on what the average is, which we'll talk through in a second. Cool. Right. So why is it important? So if you don't have a pricing strategy, you're literally going to get into a few pickles. It can slow you down, but pretty much what it will do is if you don't have a pricing strategy, you're just simply making it up. And by making it up, how do you actually know that it's competitive and profitable? So you just shouldn't be doing that. You need to be competitive, as mentioned, because it is a price is a factor that customers will either buy your product or not. So they'll look at it and say, I like the look of it, but then they might not buy it because it's just the wrong price. So again, this is all about knowing your audience and knowing what their wallet size is. Also, a pricing strategy allows you to absorb costs. So that's one of the steps I'll show you. It's all about, can you up price or down price? And again, if you've got a pricing strategy, a structure, it will help you to move into wholesale a lot quicker. And it's all about transparency. So that's my reasons as to why a pricing strategy is so important to you. And the first bit, so let's go through the steps. So the first one is all about perception. And again, it's just simply a question. How do you want to be perceived by your price point? So it's quite a simple thing. So, if a brand's $1,000, you automatically think, wow, they're expensive. Is it good quality? Like, you start to put these questions about like the perception of expensive. The same you'd do with if a dress costs £15. You'd start to question that. Is it cheap? Is it going to fall apart? What's wrong with it? So ask how you want your product to be priced. Do you want to be entry price point, mid price point, exit? So it's all about perception. How do you want to be perceived in the market? So try and answer that question and be aware of that. So I've just given some examples on the screen. Step 2. So step 2 is all about doing a competitive pricing analysis. So all you need to do here is use a similar structure to what I've done. And I'll show you a quick example. And it's a case of your brand, your entry and exit price points by the categories that you sell. Repeat. So who are all of your competitors? I always encourage up to 10 and start to enter their entry and exit price points for that category. Because what it will do is, here we go. It will give you a table pretty much here where you can see on this summary, you can start to understand based on all of your competitors. So all of this data that's filled in here, you can actually start to see, can you up price or down price based on your competitors? So that's why it's extremely important. So yeah, here we can see, for example, that this brand, their entry price point was 112 for a bodysuit, but their competitor's entry price point was 164. Therefore, you could actually charge more and be competitive based on the average of your competitors. So here is a really, really important guidance piece for you to actually make sure, again, that you could be competitive, make a profit, and either up or down your price points based on what this data is telling you. So running this either seasonally or at worst every year is something that you should keep doing. Keep checking that your price points are relevant for your market and for your competitor. And this is, the best table structure that I've come across. So really focusing on the percentage, the variance. Back we go. Oops. So that is explaining that step. Next one. So the outcome, as I mentioned, I don't think I'll talk through this again, but really it's a case of understanding it. You can do an analysis, but you need to get the summary. What's the summary telling you? And that's all about, can you up price, down price, still be competitive? So hopefully that all makes sense. So the next method. So as mentioned, this is starting to understand, can you up price or down price? So for example, if you're wanting to go into third-party e-commerce or wholesale, it's really good to look to pretty much use your competitors and to start to see what do they price on their own website and what do they price on third-party websites. So this could be a case of brands that are overseas, how do they price on their own website versus, again, a platform in a different country. So you can start to see how much they'd either up price or down price, because what this is doing to you is suggesting, are they having to be cheaper in a certain territory versus their own, or can they be more expensive? So this is, again, a case of really understanding based on the markets that you're going into, can you afford to change to speak to the audience? So obviously, if you're competitors and you get an overall analysis, this is just looking at one, but if all of them are down pricing in the UK, and you're going to go in there with a higher price point based on your Australian dollar price point, you're not going to be competitive. And there'll be a reason why they're down pricing, because the competition, the customers in that market require a lower price point. That's the wallet size that they have. That's the needs of that customer, is to have that cheaper product. So if you were to just ignore that, you'd go in there with a more expensive product and it may not sell because it may not be speaking to your audience. So it's really important that you actually use this as part of your analysis. So moving on to the fourth step in how to do a pricing strategy is to look at exchange rate. So again, you might be thinking, why the heck do I need to do this? But it's actually really important. So a way you can do that is back in this table here, you can, if you look at different currencies, you can actually work out what the exchange rate was that they used from, say, the Australian dollar to the GBP or to the euro, and actually start to see what the exchange rate was for your competitors. So therefore, you know what they were using. But also you can use this tool here, which is, it gives you the pretty much the market average. So here you could look at, okay, what's actually been happening with the exchange rate from the GBP to the euro. And you can look at it at a daily rate, you can look at it over a 10-year period and look at the average. So what it's telling you here is what's the close, so what's the overall average versus what's the high and low as a 10-year. So here we can see it's 1.16. If we look at a monthly view, it's actually the same, so it hasn't changed much. 2 years, it's probably going to be the same. So this gives you an indication of, rather than just using Google and whacking it in and seeing what today's exchange rate is, this will give you an indication of what the average is, what the high has been. And generally, most people would look at like a year. So, you know, you might say, okay, my competitors, based on their table, I've got the wrong slide, they were actually using a slightly higher exchange rate. Therefore, that's what I'm going to use. So it's important that you actually choose an exchange rate and stick with it and form this structure. Because again, you've got then a guidance of how much fat you've got in your price points. Therefore, how much can you afford to, say, give away on marketing or give away on the cost of your garment, etc. So the more fat and that you can put into your price point, again, it's all about being profitable as well as being competitive. So something like exchange rate is something you should 100% be considering. Great. So the next, the final step is, once you've got all of this, this is again a table that I encourage you to create. And this is where you start to then add in the information that you've learned. So you've got your retail prices, you then start to play around with a percentage up increase. So were people up pricing, down pricing when you're looking at a different market? What was the exchange rate that you've applied? How are you going to do your rounding? Are you going to be a 99 brand, a pound brand? And then you decide on a final. So this is a way that you can structure this. And this then means that you can then start to enter down the side and say dresses. For dresses, these are my major price points, and highlight them. Therefore, if you ever to sell these dresses, you know, maxis always cost between 79 and 89. If you were then to go and sell it to ASOS, then you would know that that's £48 and £54. So it gives you structure, and you know, because you've done the research, that again, there's enough margin, there's enough fat in your products based on the research that you have done. Cool. So that gives you a framework to follow when pricing your product. So as mentioned, the next thing, which is a part that you're probably thinking I haven't explained, which is very, very true, I haven't. So that's just your price point. That's just making sure that it's a competitive pricing versus your competitors and versus the market. Cool, that's that, great. But what you need to do is actually start to understand, what that means when you're looking at your costs. So for example, what we're trying to do here is, for every item you sell, if you want to achieve a gross margin of 70, your costs therefore can't exceed 30. So if you always know that your pricing structure strategy, your price matrix, you've got key price points that you're trying to price your dresses in, for example, therefore you can't exceed more than $23.70. I keep doing it in the wrong currency, sorry, of cost. So your product can't cost more than that if you actually want to achieve a good gross margin. So that's why, again, it's good to have a pricing strategy now at the beginning before you start to design your product, because then you're actually designing product knowing this dress will cost $79, therefore it can't cost more than $23. So that could differ if you want to achieve a higher margin, but generally in the industries that I've worked in, more of the fast fashion model, achieving a 70 is actually what most strive for. It could be as little as like 58, it could be as high as 80, but generally, yeah, 70 is what you'd aim for when you're looking at a gross margin. Okay, so a case study. So these guys, it's just kind of to talk it through. I can't share the obviously ins and outs financials, but for example, these guys based in Australia, they did a competitive analysis and they worked out that they could up price. This was looking at their similar competitors that were selling on Zalando, and they worked out that they could actually up their prices by 10% based on doing the steps that I did. These guys, so they wanted again to launch on ASOS, and they were actually rejected. It was a no, because they had done the research. The research told them that they were too expensive, but pretty much they didn't follow that. They, carried on and got rejected because they just were too expensive and unknown, and it was just a no. So this is just some examples of, yes, I'm talking about wholesale here, but why it's really important to do the analysis to work out if your customer is going to pay the price. Great. So let's move into the next step of how to actually know how to break even, how to actually be profitable upon launch. So this is all about financial forecasting. So some of you may or may not have done this, but when it comes to launching, again, I really, really encourage everyone to actually put a financial plan in place. It shouldn't be something that you just jot down your costs on a piece of paper or overlook this step. It's really important that from day one, even if you spend £10, that this is actually documented, because every cost going out will affect you in the long run. So just take your time and do this. So with financial forecasting, it's logic, it's common sense. Because you're a brand new brand, you're highly unlikely to have history, to have previous sales data to go off. Therefore, you have to make assumptions. So that's why it does come down to common sense and logic. So how to actually forecast. So I'm just going to go through this step by step, and then I'll actually open up a P&L and show you what I've kind of talked about. So how you actually do it is pretty much a forecast should always be a channel at a time, because each channel can have different costs. So what do I mean by that? I mean, you shouldn't look at your cash flow for your own website and wholesale in the same scenario, because your costs for your own website versus your commercial discounts with a wholesale partner are very different. So you should look at every channel separately pretty much. So have different Excel sheets for every channel. So what you're trying to do first is actually trying to estimate, forecast. And the easiest way to do this is to look at how many units you think you're going to sell. So again, you might be thinking, how do I work that out? So you have to think of how many options do you have? So, you've got a collection of 10 pieces, and how many units are you even going to make? So that always comes down to, are you going to have 100 units by 10 options? Therefore, you've got 1,000 to sell. Like, how many are you actually going to make in the first place? And then you have to start to just break it down to say, what's the reach of the channel that you're going to sell on? Is it your own website? Therefore, how many people in your audience do you already have? How many people on your email list? Like, how active is that channel? Are you going to go into wholesale? Therefore, you know that they sell in 10 different countries and their database is in the millions. So start to make assumptions about how many units you think you're going to sell. They need to be realistic, because it's always better to overachieve than to underachieve. So how I'd ask you to do this is to use the obvious, I've made this many units and this many options, and just start to break it down month by month of when you're expecting to launch and how many units you think you're going to sell. So I'll explain this more on an actual Excel in a second. Then pretty much sanity check, I've actually just talked about the two together. So when you're looking at how many you're going to sell, you think you're going to sell, when do you think you're going to have spikes in sales? So for example, campaign launches, marketing, or markdown events, like work out your calendar, your sales calendar, because this will highlight to you peak sales, peaks and lows. I think that's the right way of saying it. So sanity check. Step 3. Once you know your units, the next thing, which is the multiplier, is to actually work out what your average selling price is. So you can make this as detailed as possible, which I would encourage, but generally in financial forecasts, you just do it as an average. So what's the ASP, the average selling price of the collection that you will be launching? And so you would apply that as a flat rate to your projected unit sales that month. So as mentioned in the previous one about sanity checking, so if you say no in one of the months, you're going to be marking your product down. You're expecting to do a sale event. Therefore, in that month, you would change your average selling price by the percentage discount. So you would knock off 50% off the average selling price. So again, start to plot in and be realistic in your monthly forecast. So all that's left to do is actually multiply the two, and then this will actually start to build your forecasted sales. The final bit, which is very, very important, as I mentioned in the beginning, is to actually start to calculate your cash out. So this list I'll show in a second can be huge, and it's important that you really do cover all of your costs going out, because again, this is all about how much money do you need to invest, because if you don't know this answer, you could launch, you could run out of money, and it could all go very wrong very quickly, and therefore you'll fail. So it's all about how to be successful. So you need to know how much money you're spending is pretty much it. So here are some costs going out. So this is just a handful of them. This is some of the major ones, most common, but this is again just a prompt for you. You may have all of these, you may have additional ones. This is just for you to actually start to list out, but these are all costs going out that you need to be aware of. You need to know how much, when are you paying for these, weekly, monthly, and actually plot these into a plan to again understand your cash flow, to know how much money you need to invest before you break even. So forecasting tips and a quick time check. Cool. So pretty much, as mentioned, be conservative. So don't whack in something because you're like, oh my God, I'm going to make £1 million in my first year. Are you? Be real. If the cost is unknown, so if you don't know one of these costs, put an estimate in. So, look online, ask around, put an estimate in. It's always better to have something in there, and again, put it higher, and then you can always save money. Keep notes about the assumptions that you've made, because you could come back to this plan and be like, well, how did I get to that number? Highlight the unknown costs again, so you know to go back and to update them when you've actually got a real cost. And again, this is your own financial forecast. So don't be afraid to make it colorful or to do a key or something. Use your own language. Make sure you're super comfortable with this, because a lot of people can be off put by numbers. So the more notes you make, coding, whatever that makes you comfortable, makes you happy to go and do this task, then do it. So they're pretty much, just tips for you. So let's look at a case study. So it's none of this is real information, just because obviously that would be silly of me to do that. Right, so this is a template. Everybody can have a different one. It doesn't have to be this specific format. This is just the way that I do it. So as mentioned, if you were to refer back to the PDF, which you will have, this shows the step-by-step. So I talked about cash in first, then I talk about cash out, which is this huge long list. And then here, this is actually the major thing of understanding how much money you need up front before you break even. So in what we're talking about today, this is like the most important line. So say if you're launching a brand, this is your 20,000 investment, and you need to understand before your planned launch, are you actually going to have enough money before you break even? So here we can see, so pretty much brackets mean negative. So here you can actually see that I'm decreasing because I'm spending money, and I'm actually negative 100 before I gain sales and before I go back into cash flow positive. So that's why it's, as mentioned, so important that all of the costs going out of your business are actually like accurately entered. There could be one-off costs that you just had incurred in July, fine. They can be monthly costs where you spread the cost of, you're going to have to buy paper or pens, whatever, for your office. So again, this can be estimates. It could ebb and flow. It might not be a steady set amount every single month, but pretty much I really, really encourage you to sit and work out what this list is and start to apply them in here. And, again, this can be a working document, but this is something where you're better to have more fat in here, so that you realistically know that you've got enough money to launch with before you break even. So that's kind of, I've explained it backwards, to be honest. So what you need to do in here, and this is something that you can take off this Excel, or you could do a separate tab, but what you really need to do to start to forecast your sales, so again, going back to this 5-step process, is to actually start to say, okay, when's my launch month? Great, it's February, easy, let's like highlight that. That's the month I'm going to launch. Therefore, how many options am I going to launch with? 8. How many units? This could be your starting point. How many units have I bought of that? Great, so that's 50. So that equals my total stock inventory is 400. So now what you need to do, and your ASP is 100. So now what you need to do from this is actually work out, when do you think you're going to sell the 400 units? You're not going to sell it all. That's highly unlikely. So then you start to plot in, you could break this down by month, by week, of when you think there's going to be the highs and lows in your selling period, and start to again make assumptions based on, okay, well, I know in April I'm going to have more stock coming in. I know in June it's like end of the season, therefore I'm going to do a markdown, therefore like your ASP might go down to 50 here, and you think you're going to sell like, I don't even know, 19 units, whatever, then that will start to pull your numbers down. So this is a bit where it's all about assumptions, knowing what your sales plan is, start to forecast in how many you think you're going to sell. So here, this is generating the cash, the retail value. What's next, and that's really important in, again, working out how much cash you need before you break even, is to, again, be realistic. So we all know that you're not just ever going to sell 400 units. We all know in e-commerce, there's returns. So if you're going to be offering returns, which I encourage you to, you've got to work out what's the average return rate for your product category. So that's something that you might already know, you might have to do some research about, but pretty much plug in what your returns is. So therefore you're getting a realistic net sum. So if you're 40, you'd expect to actually sell 28 based on returns. So then from the actual true amount sold, this is then where all of your money gets split out. So, sorry, I haven't actually said another really important one. So actually, once you've looked at that, you need to strip out one of the most obvious ones first, which is the cost of goods. So how much did it cost you to make that? And if you remember back to the pricing strategy, I talked about the cost of goods being 30% of the retail price. So here is where we'd say, so if my item cost £100, it cost me here in this example £25 to make it, therefore it's 25%. So it's good again that you work out what the average is. So what's the average cost of goods for your product, and put it in here. So again, it could be an estimate for now because you don't know, but a guidance is that it can be very rarely, but it could be 15% and it could be up to like 40. So put it in, strip it out. So that's how much it cost you. So here we're now actually at a true figure. And from this point onwards, what you need to do is to strip out all of these costs that happen every single month, and then you'd actually get down to what's actually happening. So this is then when we're actually looking at your running total of those sales that I made, actually what's my final. So pretty much if you sold 40, your final position is 17. So that's actually a true running calculation of how much money you've made. So this is, something I encourage you to get comfortable with, color code it, put your language in there, do what you need. But the thing you're focusing on is how much money do you need before you break even. Cool. So let's go back to this. So if that was a bit overwhelming for everybody, feel free to ask questions at the end, or I can do a separate session after this by all means. Okay, so this next bit. So if your cash flow, if your cash flow negative, these are ways to kind of overcome this. So if you've just done that and you were cash flow negative before you planned to launch, what you can do to improve that situation is actually look at launching on more channels, because more channels, more sales. You could look at increasing your RRP, therefore your average selling price, your ASP would be higher, therefore you will generate more revenue. You could really start to look at the costs. So do you need to pay an agent to do your marketing? Can you renegotiate payment terms with your supplier? Like, how can you improve the money going out and make it less, pretty much? And one thing, which is a major thing that I encourage new brands to do, is actually prioritize costs, and by asking yourself, what's the return on investment? So if you spend £20, is it worth it? What's that £20 going to generate for you? And if it's not, if it's an unnecessary, now's the time to cull it. It's not needed, and focus on the costs that will actually generate a return on investment. Cool. So that hopefully will help you guys to actually know how much money you need before you break even. So how much money you need to invest before you break even. So I do really encourage you to do that, because it's like number 1 and 2 reason why brands fail is because they just price the products wrong, don't know their audience, the perception's all off, and they just simply didn't know how much money they needed before they actually made money. So really important. Here we go, topic 3. So time check, we're all good. When is the right time to launch a collection? So this is another major factor of why brands might launch. And it's a really challenging one nowadays with COVID and everything crazy that's happening, that, you need to launch at the right time. You planned to launch then, and there's a reason why. So really trying to stick to it within your means is really fundamental to your success. So I'm going to talk through 3 different topics here, or subtopics here, to help you to understand to help you to decide when is the right time to launch your collection. Okay, so the first bit. So a successful launch. So this is just like a sentence that I always say. So it's determined by delivering the right product to the right market at the right time. So you really need to get all 3 of those spot on to pretty much ensure the most successful sales you possibly can for your brand. So just to break that down, you've got to give the product, the right product that customer wants, that there is demand in that market for, and and it's at the right time. So again, it's literally hitting the nail on the head. There is demand right now, let's deliver it to that customer in that market, because that's what all the data and all the information is telling me. So you've just got to get that formula spot on. So pretty much how you do this is just by having epic project management skills. Like, again, if it's something that you hate, there are ways to simplify this, but it's really something that you just need to be in control of. So let's talk about this. So to drum it home a little bit more and talk about why an on-time launch is so important. So if you don't launch on time and you're a brand new brand and you've hyped yourself up, you've done like pre-marketing, then your customers are going to be like, hello, where's my product? So you're going to let people down, you're going to piss them off. That's not a good start. You'll have wasted your money. So if you don't launch on time, you've just got out costs happening and nothing's coming in. You could also let other channels down. So for example, if you launch late on wholesale, you can actually get charged. If you run late, you might have to air your stock, which is more costly than sea freight. You may have to rush, therefore you could actually have lower quality product and overlook things, make mistakes, forget to look at the detail. Also, one of the big ones, which is a topic that I talk about, I think it's the fourth masterclass that I'm running, is actually poor sell-through and how detrimental that is to the health of your business and your cash flow. Also, you might not achieve the right sales based on your plan, and you might have to mark down stock. Therefore, you're selling it at half price versus full price. Like, all of these hopefully are alarm bells in your head and you're thinking, I don't want this to happen. So therefore, you just literally need to launch on time. So understanding your market, that's the starting point of launching on time. So a successful launch plan is created based on knowing your target market and consumer. So you can see again how all of the topics I'm talking about interlink. So it always comes back to who is your audience and knowing your market. Because again, you need to really understand the basic things. So for example, when's Eid if you're in the Middle East? When's Christmas if you're in Europe? It's not actually on the Christmas Eve that we know it in the UK. So when are the actual traits of your market that will dictate the sales of your brand? So that's just a few examples of why it's important. So considerations. So let's mute myself. You need to understand your market traits to understand when is the right time to launch. So here again, I always love to give some questions because it helps you to answer them and start to build a framework. So these are just some of them. So again, what are the mindsets of your audience? When does the global fashion calendar state that summer starts? Is your collection seasonal? Therefore, it needs to be sold in summer. Therefore, it can't be late and sell in autumn. There's so many questions you need to answer to be able to start to understand this. So this is just some of the considerations. So one thing that I mentioned in the beginning is mindsets. So I'm not going to read through all of these because there's a couple of pages, but one thing to again understand about your audience, so you know which market you're going to launch in. And again, if you're British, you live in the UK, you'll understand that audience, that market more. But for example, start to think more of an e-commerce mindset and what shoppers expect in those markets. So for example, overall, the UK is more of a price conscious market. They're savvy shoppers, therefore they know when to hold off because they know a sale's going to be happening on Boxing Day, for example. Black Friday is huge there, so why would you launch a new collection at full price the week before Black Friday? That's just not a smart idea. School proms, like that's something that happens probably earlier than the days I've got on here. Back to school, that's like peak selling period if you sell like children's shoes. So again, there's traits of your market that will suggest to you when is the right time to launch to give you the best opportunity to sell your product. So start to list these down, because again, when you're doing your forecast, which I talked about in the last topic, you'll start to understand the highs and the lows, of when you should see peak sales in your market. So I won't go through each of the territories, but it's the exact same principle that I just talked about for all of these. So really, again, just understand your market and their mindsets. The next one, which I mentioned about knowing when the right time is to launch. So this is very important because you and I as general people, general people, that we would say, oh, summer doesn't really start in the UK till June, but summer in the Northern Hemisphere, based on an actual fashion season, summer actually launches in January. So it's crazy. Like, you'll have your product. Oh, I think I've done that the wrong way around. Summer will launch in, no, so that's, I think I've done that wrong. Anyway, sorry. So I guess I'll talk about autumn. No, that is correct. In fact, yeah. So summer will launch in January in the UK. So therefore, in January, it's freezing. Like, we're all wearing jumpers and bobble hats and it's freezing. But that's actually when the fashion calendar changes. And that's when the season expects it, which again is mind-blowing, mind-boggling. And your customers probably would disagree to that. However, because retail, e-commerce, bricks and mortar, they're all doing that. They've all done this step change to summer. If your brand's doing something different, that could either be something really unique and cool that you could like do really well with, but it's highly unlikely that it will. You might stand out and be questioned. So therefore, it's actually something you do need to be aware of. Like, what's the fashion season dictating you to do? So pretty much just be aware of the expectations of the industry that we exist in, and when there'll be, I guess, pretty much here, there'll be markdowns happening in May, June, fall, spring, summer, which is bonkers, but that's what happens. And again, therefore, if you were to launch your collection in the Northern Hemisphere, full price in May as a brand spanking new launch, you might struggle to sell it at full price because you're up against a lot of markdown brands. So again, really important to understand the industry as well as the mindsets and expectations of your market. Cool. So now you need to ask yourself, who's your audience? When do they want your product? What market trends do you need to be aware of? And when is the key selling periods for your product? So map it into a table as mentioned, and this will help you to start to forecast your sales that little bit more accurately. So I guess the only thing to mention, which I go into a little bit more detail still, is I encourage you to just add buffer on. So especially if you're a brand spanking new brand, you've never worked with your suppliers before, add buffer. Like, never expect them to ship on time, never expect things to go to plan. So I've put 4 to 6 weeks there. You could actually be at least 8 weeks, but add buffer on. So really get ahead of everything you need to be doing well in advance of the launch, because yeah, to have time up your sleeve is not a bad thing. If you launch late, as mentioned, it can be really detrimental to your profitability and success. Cool. So launch plan, how do you do it? So this is again something like the very first sub lesson I taught in topic 1. This is something you can apply to the launch of your brand as well as any new individual product launches you do. So this is the exact same working progress, working steps that you need to follow to launch on time. So pretty much like the right time to launch, to know when the right time to launch a collection, all you need to do is work backwards. Sorry, that was a tongue twister for some reason. So if you know I'm launching in January, you've got a launch date. Perfect. Stick to that. What do you need to do? What are the work backwards milestones, micro steps that you need to achieve to launch on time? So a few tips, because this is all about project management. There's a couple of ways to do this. So if you're just a solopreneur, this all relies on you, but you could introduce a RACI to your factory, for example, to highlight to them what they're responsible for. So there's responsible, accountable, consulted, something else, can't remember. But pretty much a RACI is something where this is more important if there's more of you in your business, that you can actually highlight who within the tasks, who is responsible for achieving them. So pretty much, I guess it's just passing the buck to them to say that this sits with you to actually achieve this. Cool. Are you on board with that? Great. So everybody's really clear. Also, there's something called Trello, which is pretty much, it's just, you might choose to use notepads, the big desk ones, or you might choose to use post-its and put them on your wall. But pretty much what Trello does, it enables you to do different boards and have different tasks. And again, you can set reminders, so it pops up as an alert. You can tag it to somebody else. So there's many of these different systems, processes that you can invest in, use, but I'd really encourage you to digitalize your to-do list, and don't just put it in a notebook, because imagine if you lose that notebook, you lose everything. If it's on a computer, you don't run that risk. So this is what a launch plan looks like. Yours again could look different, but what this is just highlighting to you is it's week by week. What do you need to achieve? And it's breaking it into blocks. So we're going to go through this in a second, but this is working backwards from your launch date. So a launch date would be far over to the right. And this is everything in its block, in its category of what you need to do to keep you on time to launch. So as mentioned, they're weekly tasks. So that's just a way that you can visually have a map on Excel, and then each of these milestones you could plot into Trello and put a date on it, so everybody's aware of what needs to happen, and you can be notified if it's past its deadline. So working backwards, so pretty much a launch date, then you need to work backwards from that. And you can call it a launch plan. This could be similar to a critical path. Critical path is generally something you'd share with your supplier. So however you want to shape this is your choice. But this is just pretty much showing you, again, this is like your checklist. So you can print this off and work to it. But this is everything you need to check that you've achieved to ensure within this milestone, this larger milestone, that you'll actually achieve a launch if you've done all of these. So before you launch your collection, you'd ship it. What do you need to do to make sure you ship it? You check your production samples. To build an online presence before you launch, you need to do social media, you need to do your website, you need to invest in marketing, you need a plan, a social media plan. So they're all the things you need to do to actually build an online presence. Branding, what's your logo? What's the overall branding, tone of voice of your brand? Fit, approved strike-offs, garments, sign off your garment labels, etc. So here you can start to see that working backwards from a launch date of all of these major stages, you've got all of these micro tasks. So this is a structure, a framework for you guys to follow to actually map out into a launch plan everything that you need to do within this step to ensure that this sticks to your timeline. So the more detailed you are, the better. And again, digitalize this. So again, I won't read out everything. I think it's something that you can revert back to, but it's hopefully quite clear. There's a lot that you need to do to make sure that you run on time. And everything that I'm teaching here is actually like a methodical step-by-step approach. So I guess if I do it back, the correct way would do it, you'd find your niche first, which is what we talked about today. You'd plan your collection. How many options? Like, what are the designs? Then you'd move on to that. Sourcing, what does it cost? Your mood board, and find your manufacturer. Then you'd look at shipping methods, etc. So this is a progressive journey. This is a step-by-step, and this is what you need to plan into your time and to other people's to make sure everything's achieved when it should. As a brand owner, it's your responsibility to do this, to manage it through. And again, digitalize, and then you're accountable because you've got an alert, you've got something to check and verify every day when you come into work. Cool. So my top one. So this is the first time brand owner tips. So I've mentioned this, but digitalize. Calendar alerts, gosh, I love them, so do it. Remove tasks off your to-do list. Never remove tasks off your to-do list unless you've actually done it. Don't kid yourself. Create to-do list, break it down. Don't just do this one whopping great big list. Create alerts, set dates, tag people, incentivize your team. If you can see there, slacking to say, if you do all of this, you can have Friday afternoon off. communication is key. So if people aren't responding, pick up the phone. Pretty much it's your responsibility to micromanage this through. So do whatever you can in your control to make sure that your collection launches on time and time again. Great. So the outcome. So by the end of this topic, you should feel confident that the month, the week, the specific date that you're choosing to launch your collection on is right. So you should know the date and exactly why. You should be able to say, I'm going to launch on this date because of XYZ. I'm going to go into sale on this date because of XYZ. You should have this mapped out. And once you've mapped this out, this should literally marry back perfectly with your finances and with your cash flow. So everything is pretty much humming to the same tune. Great. Okay, we're on the home straight. So topic 4, how are you going to sell your collection? So again, success is about being profitable, and you actually want to launch and not rely on your friends and family to buy it. So again, this is something that I see with new fashion brands that, you know, you might have a bit of a hype for launch and then it goes stagnant, and that's not ideal. So you need to work out from day dot of how to actually launch with an audience that's eager to actually buy your collection. So I'm just going to talk through 3 different methods here. There's many more, which you'll find to contact me after to learn more. But for now, I'm just going to focus on 3. Ooh, Christ, that's bright. Okay, so how are you going to sell your collection? So a solid sales strategy should consider an omni-channel approach. So this was a topic I covered heavily in the last masterclass. So I'm sure, if you want to learn more about that, then there might be opportunity to speak to the team and gain access. So an omni-channel approach is a way to create synergy between your brand's communication and your sales channel. So what do I mean by that? You want every single touch point with your customer to really sing your brand energy, look and feel. So it needs to be the same branding, it needs to be the same pretty much consistency, customer journey. So if you say have an Instagram shop and a website and you're doing a pop-up in a local mall, you need it to all be instantly recognizable that it's your brand. So that's what a good omnichannel approach is, that the same messaging, the same colors, like everything around the branding is very recognizable, the product's recognizable, the customer service is recognizable, everything around the experience is all singing the same song again. So it's really important nowadays that you can offer multiple ways for your customer to buy your product. So pretty much be clever, be inventive, think of different ways to sell your product beyond just your website. So that's something that, again, maybe you won't do this for launch, as in brand spanking new launch. This is something you can look to evolve into once you've kind of launched, stabilized, and learned some lessons. Once you're a bit more confident in your abilities, then really start to, again, be creative in where you choose to sell your product and how you can create this omnichannel approach. So yeah, there's so much more I can say about this. And in the approach of what we're kind of talking about today, be aware that more channels does equal more revenue. However, don't bite off more than you can chew. So be cautious and conscious with this, and also make smart decisions. Don't just scattergun approach and dampen the overall vibe of your brand by doing that. Okay, so pre-sale methods. So with this, there are 4 different ways I'm going to talk about achieving pre-sales. So the first one, building an email database. So this is one, again, I could probably talk a lot about, but I see this way too often, that brands focus on like, oh my God, did you see this post? I got like 50 likes. Like, oh my God, that's amazing. They love it. Do they? Like, a like isn't a sale. So we do need to be really conscious about when to post and when to email. So from my perspective, email marketing is like so important to fashion brands to actually converting customers. So this is where we can talk about click-through rates, So click-through rates are applicable in Facebook marketing as much as they are in email marketing, where you're actually getting a customer to make an action, to actually click through. So I'm jumping probably too far ahead for that, but really a like, again, it isn't somebody really making a convincing action. They can just be simply liking some aspect of it. So that's why it's really important as a new brand to not get too fixated in your Instagram, fantasies and worlds, that actually to be business smart and to really focus your time and effort on marketing that converts, marketing that has a good return on investment, not likes. So to give a bit more of an explanation, so emails are speaking one-on-one to your audience. So you would be, yes, it could be generic, that you send out to multiple people, which is the most common, but to the customer, it can feel really personalized. So you can choose to actually send individual emails in the beginning, but pretty much you're speaking one-on-one with your customer when you've got an email. So it's a great way to actually build a relationship and to actually, talk on a one-on-one and really connect. So you can use social posts, and I'm now say positive things about them. So say you've just got this amazing piece of content, like I'm just going to go and say you got featured in Vogue, like, wow, amazing. You want to literally scream that from the top of your building. Therefore, you wouldn't just do one-on-one emails. You would literally get that post in front of every single person you possibly could. Therefore, social media is really good for stuff like that. So if you've got amazing content that you want to push, you could put it on Instagram and Facebook, like all of the channels. And also you could then market it. So you could do an ad behind it. So that's probably a bad example of the Vogue, but say if you've got like this epic jean that's come in, that's got like something really unique about the sustainability factor of it, you could do a post, you could advertise it, and you can test engagement that way. So there are fantastic ways to go quite broad and to reach a bigger community that are interested in denim and test engagement. So pretty much that's an overall indicator, but really you should be focusing on those one-on-one conversations, because they're the customers that are actually, they've chosen to give you their email address, they're investing in you and they want to get to know you more, they're trusting you, and therefore they're the ones that are more likely to give you their money as opposed to those that like you on Instagram. So pretty much Facebook and Instagram is good for communicating with people, like starting to build your audience. But again, the aim of the game is to actually gain emails. So you can talk, start to build the relationships, but you still need to convert them into your like dedicated audience database. So what I encourage, I've got a few different methods to show you to get emails. So start at least 6 months, if not a year prior to launch, to actually start to gain an email database. And again, this is, you could call it your community, your fan base, your followers, whatever, same, but I'm specifically talking, you want their emails. You want to really know that they're in your club, not just like a fictional friend. So how to actually build those different methods. So to acquire email addresses, there's a few different strategies. So pre-order wish lists is a one way, discount signups is another, and competitions. So these are 3, and there are more, but these are 3 that I recommend. So on the next few slides, I'll go through these in detail, but pretty much again, this is all about, yes, you might have to pay for some of these. This isn't paid marketing. You wanted to be acquiring leads with less than, sorry, I should have knocked the dollar off there, less than what, pretty much if you can do anything for around £1, that's absolutely fantastic, or less. So don't be afraid to spend to acquire email addresses. They're really, really valuable, so it is worth it. But again, it's all about keeping a low cost per lead, therefore a better return on investment. So again, pre-order wish lists, discount signups, competitions, you will notice I'm not talking about social media followers. So that is a byproduct of this strategy. So email addresses are far more valuable. So hopefully that's really resonated with you. So this is just a quote. So rather than launching with 0 customers, you really should use pre-orders to help you to, achieve exactly not that. That's probably said wrong. You want to use pre-orders to get customers. So this is just a quote from a customer. So pre-orders allow you to obtain feedback prior to releasing to your product to the full market, said the director of that shirt. This can give you a chance to iron out any kinks and accurately scale how well your product service was going to be. So this is literally exactly that. So this is a method to actually, yes, make money, but also to gauge the interest of your product before you again maybe go too far into this project and realize that it's going to be a flop. So ways you can do pre-sale, there are 2 different ways. You can do pre-sale as in actually take their money, or you can do pre-order wish list. So yeah, the biggest difference is a wish list is you're literally just taking their email and putting them on like a VIP wish list, and they're like the first priority people to get it, or you're physically taking their money. So what we've experienced is it's quite hard for a brand new brand to take money off a stranger. Therefore, it's a lot easier to convince somebody to give you their email address. So potentially focusing on a wish list is something you should do first. So again, what this means, you're listing your product on Instagram shops, your own website, and you're trying to get people to put their name on a wish list because they're expressing that they want to buy it. So it can be listed, for sale as it would normally, but you just go onto a wish list. So I'm sure you guys will have probably experienced this before, but again, you're trying to get their email. And then again, that's something that's so precious. And once you've got them, it's about nurturing them and then telling them when it's ready to be bought. So pros and cons of this, just to highlight. So sale, you can obviously get cash, which can pay for your factory order. And it's truly the best way to gauge interest because if they've actually given you the money, of course they want it. Cons, if you just, your delivery goes completely kaput and you don't deliver on time, it's actually damaging because obviously that's a bad start. You'll have complaints and it's just not very good. And again, with sales, it's harder to convince people to give you the money. Wish list, it's an easier way to gauge reaction because people will give you the emails a lot easier. And it's easier to set up. And again, as mentioned, it doesn't guarantee that it will sell. So that's a con of a wish list. So pretty much, yeah, pros and cons there. You can work out which one works for you. You can always try to do one and end up doing the other. But this is a really good way to know if your collection is going to sell and gives you an opportunity to actually use this as a method to sell your collection. Great. So the next way to gain emails, lead capturing through discounts. So consumers love to feel special. So creating a sense of exclusivity and hidden rewards is a way to actually make your audience list grow. So ways to do this, which is one of the more obvious ways, is to actually have pop-ups on your website. So that is, you'll all experienced it. So you can have either an exit intent pop-up. So pretty much the 2 I'm recommending are based on data that these are the most successful options. So you either have an exit one, so you capture, it pops up when they're going to leave. So that's obviously pre-populated, or you have a pop-up appearing after 45 seconds of them being active on your website. So again, they're based on statistics that tell me that these 2 are the most successful options. So what does a pop-up look like? So I haven't done a screenshot, but this is just an example. So pretty much, what should it contain? It needs to be unique. It needs to be exciting copy. You don't just want to be like, sign up to my newsletter. like, that's not exactly exciting. It's not really going to make me do it. You could obviously, again, because it's about discounts, you could tell them that they're going to get like a prize or like something special if they like sign up, or you could literally say you're going to get 20% discount, like give them a hint, or literally give them what they're going to get as in a reward if they actually do sign up. But pretty much just make it like sound fun. So like, don't tell anyone, we're launching a new collection, want to get exclusive access, like make them feel like they're super special. And yeah, just get creative with your pop-ups to try and get people, again, to give you your email address, therefore they're in your database. So another way, competitions. So creating an engaging competition is a really good way to capture email addresses, because again, you can make this really fun, really eye-catching, and yeah, it's a great way for you to actually, again, gain email addresses, but also it's actually an opportunity for you can ask questions and start to like learn more about your audience. So a competition, yeah, it can be in the form of a survey. You can make it so the best answers win, or it goes into a raffle prize or something. Or you can make it like more fun and artistic, where it's like a designer t-shirt competition, like completely whatever you want it to be. But again, the main objective is to get email addresses from your engaged target audience. So don't forget that when you're doing all of these things, that all of these marketing efforts are speaking to your target audience. So design a competition that they would want to enter. Don't just, think of something random. So when you're doing a competition, this is just a few tips. So it's really important that they actually see value in the prize, and it's important that you give a prize. So for example, you could offer a pair of jeans from your new collection that isn't available yet, therefore that's like exclusive. But also you could do multiple prizes. So you could do like your jean and an Amazon voucher, and then second and third prize would just be an Amazon voucher. So make it so that there's not just one prize, there's a few, and there's like, so it will make more people enter because they think that they've got more chance of winning. And then one thing for you guys to know, in Europe, there's GDPR rules around marketing. So you need to actually be clear of what data you're collecting. So read up about this and be aware of the latest policies, but just don't get caught out and get into trouble. So let's look at a case study for this one. So this is Squash, who's here in Australia. Oh, okay, it's 2:45, I need to go quicker. Squash here in Australia, they did a competition. It was epic, went like pretty viral on Instagram, and it was all around t-shirts. So whoever did the best design got to actually have their t-shirt made and feature in the brand. Really cool, simple idea. Also, you can do collaborations and do competitions. So like, for example, they did a giveaway of ice cream and actually did a printed short to kind of highlight this. So again, very circular in concept. Here, very similar with Vegemite, which is Marmite, similar to it over here. And yeah, here we can see, so with this, it's all about sales. So the more kind of viral you make this, so go and check this out. The way it can generate sales when you're specifically talking to your target audience. So get creative pretty much with your competitions, collaborations, etc. Cool. I think this is the last bit, so bear with me. How to trade. So it's all about how to sell your collection. And this is something, again, that I don't really think brands necessarily think of. So you really, really focus about, okay, how do I launch? How do I make money? I just need to launch. It's all about that. Like, it's just the action of I need to launch. The big thing is, how do you trade? So it's all good launching, but then what happens? How are you actually reacting to the trade of your product? So this is something to really consider, again, to know how to sell your collection. So daily, you need to be aware of your sales data. So you need to be reading or checking your Shopify account or whatever you're using, because you might need to make quite snappy decisions. So for example, these are, again, all questions to help you to learn how to trade. But for example, do you have enough stock left of a bestseller? So say if like you've launched and you've got 1 week's cover left, alarm bells. Like, you need to be repeating that quickly, or you need to be assessing your future orders to say, if it was, say, a t-shirt dress, have you got a similar version of a t-shirt dress coming in? What's going to replace your bestseller? So this is, again, it's all good just to launch, but what are you going to do about good performers and bad performers? So, for example, a bad seller, alarm bells, like, oh my God, this is literally not sold. It's been there for like 4 weeks and sold nothing. Do you have anything else coming in of a similar ilk again? Therefore, that's risk. If the customer didn't like this version, are they going to like that version? So therefore, you need to question, can you cancel it? Can you put the material and put it back into just stock on the floor? Can you put it into some other style in the future? So again, you really need to be reactive to both good and bad sellers. And the final kind of point is to look at just general style failure. Like, okay, my audience just doesn't like long dresses. They want short dresses. Lesson learned. Like, these are the things you need to be analyzing all the time and actually making changes and improvements in your brand. Also, high returns, alarm bells. So if you're noticing trends in your weekly sales and you're seeing that this is happening, like it's coming back, you need to start to look at why. So is it because of style failure again? Is it because it was badly made? Like, what is wrong with it? You might need to go back to the factory and ask for compensation. Also, if stars are consistently doing amazing, is this something that you could have as like a bestseller? You can flow it throughout the season. You can have multiple drops and forward plan this, and therefore get a better factory cost price. And also, this is not just looking at your own sales. This is looking at marketplace wholesale. So you should be analyzing all of the sales channels that you're on a weekly basis as a minimum. So this will get easier, pretty much trading. It's something that's quite alien at the beginning, but the more that you start to understand more about your audience and your market, then it will help you to trade better. So pretty much always think outside the box and challenge yourself. It's just one thing I'd always say for trading. So the outcome, you should now know how to sell your collection pre and a little bit about post. So again, yep, you should be confident to actually make money on day one and there on out. Cool. So project work. This is obviously, I'm not expecting you to do this, but it's what I'm encouraging. I said it in the beginning, the whole purpose of this masterclass, I had 4 questions to ask, which was all the 4 topics. So now I've given you the step-by-step and the how-to. I encourage you to actually now answer these 4 questions. So will my product sell? Tell me why. How much money do you need to break even? When is the right time to launch? And how are you going to sell your collection? So if you want to do this, feel free to email me the answers. I'm more than happy to give feedback. But yeah, really actually put into practice what I've taught you today. Cool. So final little bit. So I have lots of information. So if you want more info, slightly shorter lessons than today, I've got a blog, feel free to check it out. And again, if you want any more kind of actionable lessons, feel free to drop me an email and I can help you walk through what I've taught today in more detail, because again, it could be a lot of information for some. And breathe. So that was a lot. But yes, thank you so much, everybody. Here's all of my socials. So you can connect with me. I'd love to connect with all of you. Feel free to ask me anything as mentioned.